All right, so get ready because today's deep dive is a challenge, and I'm excited to see where this goes. You've given us a fascinating mix of research, and it's all about coffee and artificial intelligence.
Wow, sounds like my kind of deep dive.
I know, right? I mean, I think we all rely on coffee to, power through the day, and especially if you're like an AI engineer, you need that to get the code compiling right.
Yeah, I've definitely had a few late nights where coffee was the only thing keeping me going.
Exactly, but this goes way deeper than just that morning caffeine jolt.
Mm.
This research suggests there's a real connection between coffee and the kind of creativity and focus you need in AI.
It's really interesting how something as, commonplace as a cup of coffee can have these connections with cutting edge technology like AI. The connections really do run deeper than you might expect.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to be exploring today, like how coffee can actually boost the kind of creativity and focus that you need in the AI field. And get this, how AI is actually transforming the entire coffee industry.
Wow, that's fascinating. I had no idea.
Yeah, from bean to cup, we're talking about everything.
So we're covering the whole ecosystem here, from the farms to the
Oh,
algorithms.
absolutely. And of course, we'll be diving into some research on how to really make the most of your coffee breaks, especially for those of us deep in the world of AI.
Sounds like we've got a lot to cover. Where should we start?
Well, one thing that really caught my eye was the research on coffee as like a creativity booster. It seems like a no-brainer that coffee helps us focus, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But this research suggests it's more than that. It impacts memory and problem-solving skills in a way that's really relevant for people who work in AI.
Oh, you're right. It's not just about like staying awake, right? Like when you're doing AI development, you have to deal with these really complex algorithms, these massive data sets, and the code where even a pretty little error can throw everything off.
Right, one misplaced semicolon and the whole thing crashes.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so the ability to like really hyper focus, really hone in on those intricate details is essential. That's the difference between a working program and a bug-filled mess.
And that's where coffee comes in.
Exactly. Caffeine acts as like a stimulant,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And it enhances your alertness and your cognitive function. It's not a magic bullet or anything.
Right, it's not like you drink a cup of coffee and suddenly you're like coding the next chat GPT.
Haha. Yeah, no. But it gives your brain that extra edge. It lets you
Yeah.
stay focused and engaged for longer, sift through all that complex data, and maybe even like make those connections that lead to breakthroughs.
It makes me think of those stories about, like famous mathematicians or physicists who would work all night fueled by coffee.
Scribbling equations on chalkboards, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe a cup of coffee really was the difference between just being stuck and making a huge discovery.
Well, it's certainly possible. I mean, we can't attribute every scientific breakthrough to caffeine, obviously.
Of course not.
But it's interesting to think how even just a small cognitive boost can have, this ripple effect, especially in a field like AI where people are pushing boundaries all the time.
So we've talked about how coffee helps us humans who work on AI. But here's where it gets really interesting. You ready for this?
Hit me with it.
It turns out AI is making some serious changes in the coffee industry itself.
Oh, wow. The reciprocal relationship. I mean, it really shows how technology is like everywhere, even in something as traditional as coffee. Like, what parts of the industry are we talking about?
Well, the research highlighted three key areas: smart farming, automated roasting, and personalized consumer experiences. Basically, AI is involved from the moment the coffee bean is planted to when you're like taking your first sip.
That's amazing. The whole process, start to finish.
Yeah. I mean, I was surprised too. I'm really intrigued by this smart farming thing.
Yeah, me too. How does that even work?
Okay, so imagine this. You've got all these sensors out in the coffee fields gathering data on, well, everything. Soil moisture, composition, temperature, humidity, even whether there are pests or diseases.
So like a full health checkup for the coffee plants?
Exactly. And all that data is then fed into these sophisticated AI algorithms that can analyze it all in real time.
Wow, in real time. That's incredible.
Yeah, identifying patterns and then making these super precise recommendations for every single plant.
It's like giving each coffee plant its own personalized care plan. That's wild. And, what's really cool is how this level of precision can impact sustainability, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if we're using resources more efficiently, minimizing waste, then AI-powered smart farming could seriously reduce the environmental footprint of coffee.
It's amazing to think about, using cutting edge technology to protect something as I guess you could say, essential as coffee.
Yeah, especially with all the challenges facing coffee-growing regions because of climate change.
Right. If AI can help those farms, adapt and thrive, then that's a win for the coffee industry and the environment.
Like a double shot of good news.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about how AI is being used out in the fields, but what happens once the beans are harvested? Well, apparently AI is getting involved in the roasting process too, with something called automated roasting.
Oh, yeah, automated roasting. It's fascinating how AI can be applied to something as, well, I guess you could say artistic as roasting, right? I mean, that's where the true craft of coffee comes into play, this delicate dance of time and temperature and airflow that turns those raw beans into, the coffee we all love.
So how does AI fit into all of that? Are we talking about robots taking over the roastery?
Not quite robots, but AI is definitely playing a bigger and bigger role in getting those perfect roasts. I mean, think about it. Each type of coffee bean has its own chemical makeup, moisture levels, density, and all of those things change how it needs to be roasted.
So it's a lot more complex than just throwing some beans in a machine and hitting start.
Yeah, way more complex. But AI can analyze all that data, figure out the exact time, temperature, and airflow needed to bring out the best in each batch.
So it's like having a digital master roaster, I guess. One that can analyze each bean and create a custom roast profile just for that bean.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, as those AI systems learn and adapt, they can even suggest totally new roasting techniques.
So maybe we'll have AI-created coffee flavors that no one's ever tasted before.
It's totally possible. It's a really cool example of how AI can not only automate things, but actually, work with human experts and push the boundaries of what's possible.
Okay, I am officially intrigued by AI-powered coffee roasting. But let's not forget about the most important part of this whole thing, us, the coffee drinkers.
Right? The end users.
So where does AI come in when it comes to that final cup we enjoy?
Well, that's where this idea of personalized consumer experiences comes in. AI could totally change how we find and enjoy coffee.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more.
Imagine a world where your coffee maker just, knows how you like your coffee based on what you've chosen before. Or your local coffee shop can suggest a new blend that matches your mood, or even the time of day.
Whoa, hold on. So it's like having a personal AI barista who just gets me.
Yeah, basically. But how does it work?
Is AI reading our minds now?
Haha, not quite mind reading. It's all about data. Every time you rate a coffee online or pick a blend at the store or even change the settings on your, fancy coffee maker, you're creating data that AI can use.
So every sip, every click, every little adjustment I make, it's all feeding into this AI system that's learning what I like.
Exactly. And as it gets more data, it gets better at predicting which coffees you'll enjoy.
So it might even suggest coffees I've never tried before.
It could. Or suggest brewing methods that are perfect for your taste. It could even, figure out what you want before you even know it.
Wow, that's both really impressive and a little bit creepy.
I know. It's a little unsettling to think about how much data we're generating about something as simple as our coffee habits, but the potential for, a truly personalized experience is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, imagine a world where you never have to drink a bad cup of coffee again.
Exactly. It's like coffee nirvana.
Now, that's a future I can definitely get behind. But before we all run out for the latte, I want to circle back to how we can use coffee to our advantage, especially for those of us working in fields like AI. We talked about how it can boost creativity, but are there specific things we can do, like strategies for maximizing those coffee breaks to really harness that boost?
That's a great question, and actually, there is some interesting research on that. We've all been there, right? That afternoon slump where you just need another cup to keep going.
Yeah.
But what if there's a smarter way to do it?
Yeah, that's what I want to know. You gave us some research that mentioned some specific tips for maximizing those coffee breaks,
Right?
especially for people working in AI. Things like timing, active breaks, and moderation.
Yeah, those are key.
I think those are worth diving into. What do you say?
Let's do it. Okay, so let's start with timing. A lot of people think that drinking coffee first thing in the morning is the best way to get going.
Yeah, it's almost a ritual for some people.
Yeah.
You wake up, you stumble to the coffee maker, and then you're good to go.
Right, exactly. But the research actually suggests that might not be the most effective strategy.
Really? So I shouldn't be hitting the coffee pot as soon as I roll out of bed.
Well, it really depends on, your individual body and your sleep patterns. But for a lot of people, our cortisol levels, those are the hormones that make us feel alert. They're already at their highest in the morning.
Oh, interesting.
So if you add caffeine on top of that, it can actually lead to a crash later on instead of giving you that sustained energy you're looking for.
So it's kind of like you're already wired, and then you're adding more fuel to the fire, but then you burn out faster.
That's a great way to put it. It's better to wait until those cortisol levels naturally dip, which usually happens sometime between 9:30 and 11:30 in the morning.
So like mid-morning coffee break is actually the way to go.
Yeah, or whenever you start feeling that, mid-morning slump.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's about working with your body's natural rhythms, not just trying to like override them with caffeine.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, right? By timing your coffee intake to match your natural energy cycles, you can get a more balanced and sustained boost throughout the day.
Okay, timing, check. Now what about those active breaks? I'm curious about those. Is it really important to like get up and move around, or can I just sit here and, power through my work with my coffee by my side?
It's tempting to just stay glued to your screen, especially when you're in the zone.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that.
But even taking a short break, even just for a few minutes, can be way more beneficial than you think.
I'm not sure my to-do list would agree with that.
But think about it. When you're super focused on something, like especially something as mentally demanding as AI development, your brain can kind of get stuck in a rut.
Okay, yeah, I've definitely experienced that.
Taking a break lets your subconscious mind keep working on things in the background. It makes new connections, and sometimes those aha moments come when you're not even actively thinking about the problem.
Well, that's interesting. It's like giving your brain a chance to, I don't know, just kind of breathe and reset for a bit.
Exactly. And when you combine that break with a cup of coffee, it can really enhance that process.
So it's like a 1-2 punch for your creativity?
You could say that. The caffeine provides a little bit of a stimulus, and then actually moving away from your work, it lets you shift your perspective.
It reminds me of those scenes in movies, where some scientist or artist is struggling with a problem,
Yeah.
and then they just walk away, maybe grab a coffee, and suddenly, boom, inspiration hits them.
It's a classic for a reason, right? It's not just a Hollywood thing. There's real science behind it. Physical activity increases blood flow to the brain, and that helps your cognitive function.
So getting up and moving is like hitting the reset button on your brain.
Yeah, and just changing your surroundings, even for a few minutes, can spark some creative ideas.
Yeah.
You're exposed to new sights and sounds, and that can get those creative juices flowing.
Okay, so it's not just about the coffee itself. It's about using that coffee break as a chance to recharge, both physically and mentally.
Exactly. It's about the whole experience.
Got it. So we've covered timing and active breaks. What about moderation? That was the third tip, right?
Yeah, moderation. That one's important. It's easy to start relying on coffee too much, especially when you're under pressure or facing a tough problem.
Oh, yeah. Definitely been there. Sometimes it feels like coffee's the only thing keeping me going.
But like anything in life, too much of a good thing can actually work against you. Too much caffeine can lead to anxiety. It can mess with your sleep.
Oh, yeah. I've had those nights where I'm just staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the code I need to write.
And that can really impact your performance, especially when you're doing something as demanding as AI work. You need a clear head and enough sleep to do your best work.
So it's about finding that sweet spot where coffee helps you focus without, like, throwing off your whole system.
Exactly. You've got to listen to your body and figure out what works for you. Some people can drink coffee all day long, and others are good with just one cup in the morning.
Everyone's different.
Right. It's about personalizing your coffee intake, just like we were talking about, personalizing those AI algorithms.
Now that you mention it, I wanted to go back to something we talked about earlier, the connection between those old coffee houses, the ones from centuries ago, and modern AI labs. The research drew this interesting parallel between them. Like they both have this creative energy.
Yeah, it's a really interesting comparison. Think about those coffee houses during the Enlightenment. Places like the Grecian in London or Café Procope in Paris. Those were like the meeting places for all the intellectuals of the day.
Philosophers, writers, scientists, all hanging out, drinking coffee and debating big ideas.
Exactly. They were fueled by coffee and conversation, and they came up with some incredible ideas.
It's like those coffee houses were the original co-working spaces.
Totally. And in a lot of ways, today's AI labs have that same kind of vibe. They're collaborative spaces where researchers, engineers, data scientists, they're all working together, pushing the limits of AI.
So it's like, even though the tools and technology have changed so much, that basic human desire to connect and create, it's still the same.
It's a constant, right? And maybe coffee, with its ability to, get people talking and thinking, has been a part of that creative process all along.
From the Enlightenment coffee houses to today's AI labs.
It's a fascinating thought, isn't it?
It really is. All this talk about coffee and AI has given me a whole new perspective on both of them. It's amazing to think about how something as simple as a cup of coffee can have such a deep connection with a field as complex as AI.
Yeah, it really highlights how technology is influencing every aspect of our lives, even the things we take for granted.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've gone from the science of coffee to the future of AI and back again.
It's been a real deep dive.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay, what is it?
We talked about how AI can personalize our coffee roasts. But what if it could personalize our learning and problem solving? Could AI actually help us learn more effectively, make better decisions, and unlock our creativity in ways we haven't even imagined? What do you think?
That's a really good question, and I think it's one that's going to drive a lot of innovation in the years to come. I mean, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah, who knows what the future holds? Maybe someday our coffee makers will be giving us more than just a caffeine boost. Maybe they'll be our personal AI coaches, helping us reach our full potential.
That would be pretty amazing. Coffee and AI, the perfect blend for success.
I love it. Well, on that note, I think it's time for another coffee break. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of coffee and AI. Until next time, keep exploring, keep innovating, and keep brewing those brilliant ideas. Welcome back to the show. We've been talking about how coffee can boost our creativity and focus, especially when we're working on tough problems like those we see in AI. But I'm really curious about those tips for maximizing coffee breaks, the ones you mentioned before. Things like timing and active breaks and moderation. Can we dive into those a little more?
Yeah, let's do it. We were just talking about moderation, and it's super important, especially in a field like AI where you need to be firing on all cylinders.
Right, you don't want to be jittery and anxious when you're trying to debug a complex algorithm or something.
Exactly. And too much caffeine can also mess with your sleep, which is the last thing you need when you're already burning the midnight oil.
So it's all about finding that balance, like where coffee is helping you, not hindering you.
Right. It's like finding the perfect blend, the right amount of coffee to boost your focus without throwing off your whole system.
And that's different for everyone, right? Some people are fine with tons of coffee, and others just need a cup or two.
Yeah, it's totally individual. You have to listen to your body and figure out what works best for you.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about those active breaks? I'm still not entirely convinced that I should be tearing myself away from my work, even for a few minutes.
I know it's tough, especially when you're in the zone. But trust me, stepping away from your screen, even for a little bit, can do wonders for your creativity.
But what if I lose my train of thought?
That's actually the point. When you step away, you give your brain a chance to process everything you've been working on. Sometimes the best ideas come when you're not even consciously thinking about the problem.
So it's like I step away, grab a coffee, maybe go for a walk, and my brain is still working on things in the background.
Exactly. And when you come back to your work, you might be surprised at how much clearer things seem.
It's almost like taking a step back gives you a fresh perspective.
Right. And the physical act of moving around, getting that blood flowing, it can actually help boost your cognitive function too.
So those movie scenes where the scientist paces around, coffee in hand, suddenly has a breakthrough, that's not just a cliche.
It's rooted in science. Sometimes all you need is a change of scenery and a little caffeine boost to get those creative juices flowing.
Okay, I'm starting to see the light. Active breaks. Got it. Now, what about timing? You said there's a better time to drink coffee than first thing in the morning.
Yeah, for a lot of people, our cortisol levels are already naturally high when we wake up. Cortisol is that hormone that makes you feel alert and ready to go.
So if I'm already feeling alert, why would I need coffee right away?
Well, if you pile on more caffeine when your cortisol is already high, you might actually end up crashing later on. It's better to wait until those cortisol levels naturally dip, which is usually mid-morning for most people.
So like hold off on that first cup until around 10:00 or 11:00.
Yeah, something like that, or whenever you start feeling that mid-morning slump coming on.
So it's all about working with your body's natural rhythms, not just trying to force it with caffeine.
Exactly. You want to find that sweet spot where coffee is enhancing your natural energy cycles, not working against them.
I love that idea, working with our bodies instead of against them. Before we wrap up, I want to go back to that idea of coffee houses being like the original co-working spaces.
Oh yeah, those Enlightenment era coffee houses, those were something else.
It's just fascinating to me how centuries ago, people were gathering in coffee houses to share ideas, debate, and, basically do what we do in modern co-working spaces.
And fuel it all with coffee, just like we do today.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like even though the world has changed so much, some things stay the same. People still crave connection, collaboration, and of course, a good cup of coffee.
It's a timeless combination.
Well, I think we've brewed up a pretty insightful conversation today. We've covered everything from the science of coffee to the future of AI and the power of coffee breaks.
It's been a wild ride, but I think we've managed to connect the dots between these two seemingly different worlds.
And maybe even inspired some of our listeners to rethink their own relationship with coffee and their work.
I hope so. Maybe they'll try out some of those coffee break tips or experiment with different brewing methods.
Or maybe they'll even start brainstorming the next big AI breakthrough over a cup of coffee.
You never know where inspiration will strike. But one thing's for sure, coffee and AI are a powerful combination.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for me to grab another cup. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of coffee and AI. Until next time, keep exploring, keep innovating, and keep those creative juices flowing.